Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at a quiet space made just for you. My name is Valarie, and I am here to guide you gently into rest, to help ease your mind, soften your body, and drift you toward a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. Whether your day was long or your thoughts feel a little too loud tonight, let this be your permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. There's nothing more to do now. Just allow my voice to be your guide as we begin this gentle journey toward deep, nourishing rest. If you're new here, subscribe for sleep content like this, and like this video if you find it enjoyable. Let's begin by arriving. Take a slow, generous breath in. Hold it tenderly for just a moment. And let it drift out of you like a breeze through open windows. Do it again, but slower this time. Breathe in through the nose. Let your chest rise gently. Feel the air nourish you. And as you exhale, allow your shoulders to relax. Notice how they begin to drop, just a little. Letting go. Surrendering. With each breath, the world grows quieter. The space around you becomes softer. You're beginning to unwind. Let's continue. Bring your awareness to your body. There's no need to change anything. Just notice what is. Feel the weight of your body against the surface beneath you. The way your limbs rest. The way your spine gently aligns. There's a stillness growing within you. And you don't need to hold anything anymore. If a thought comes, let it drift past like a cloud. You are not your thoughts. You are not your to-do list. You are the quiet witness. Observing. Allowing. Letting be. Feel your forehead. Let it soften. Relax the space between your eyebrows. Release any tension in your jaw. Let your tongue rest gently. Your cheeks and mouth relaxed and calm. Soften the throat. Feel it open. Let go. Your breath is steady and slow now. You may even forget it's happening. That's okay. Sleep comes when we stop trying. It arrives like dusk, quietly, gradually. There's nothing to force. Let the back of your head sink into the pillow. Let your scalp relax. Every breath drawing you deeper. Every exhale a gentle release. Feel the wave of calm washing down through your shoulders now. Down through your arms. To your elbows. Your wrists. Your palms. And all the way to your fingertips. There's a lightness now, as if your arms could float, or as if they've dissolved into the stillness around you. Bring your awareness to your chest. Feel your heart quietly beating, a rhythm that has been with you since the beginning. It asks for nothing. It simply beats, like waves upon the shore. Let that rhythm lull you. Like a lullaby only your body understands. You are safe. You are here. Everything you need is within you. Feel your stomach rise and fall. Each breath is a loving gesture to yourself. Now down into your hips. Let them grow heavier. Release the muscles that have worked all day. They no longer need to hold. Your legs now. Thighs softening. Knees relaxing. Calves melting into stillness. Ankles loose. Feet completely at rest. Toes relaxed. You are entirely supported. The earth holds you. The night holds you. You are not alone. Allow the breath to deepen, or let it stay shallow. Whatever feels right. This is your sanctuary, a place of peace within. Nothing is required of you. Your only task is to rest. Let's take a few moments now in silence. No words. Only breath. Only stillness. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Gently Kindly bring it back to your breath. Let it be like watching a candle flicker. No effort. Just noticing. Just returning. This moment is yours. This stillness is your gift. Your nervous system is calming. Your mind is quieting. Your soul is safe. There's a soft glow forming around you. A gentle light of comfort and love. It wraps around your body like a blanket. You are completely enveloped in peace. Breathe it in. Let it settle into every corner of you. Even the parts that feel restless or tender. Especially those parts. Offer yourself compassion. Soft eyes for the parts that are tired. Kindness for the parts that try so hard. You've done enough today. You are enough as you are. Let go of the stories. Let go of the striving. Let go of tomorrow. It will come when it's ready. Right now, this is where you belong. Here in this quiet. Here in this breath. Here in this moment. As the night deepens around you, let it take you with it. Let the quiet carry you. Let sleep come like the tide, slow, steady, and certain. You are floating now, weightless, safe, loved. Rest here. There's nowhere else to be. Let the dream world gently open its door. And when you step through, may it be soft and kind. Let this moment stretch. Let your breath slow. Let sleep wrap around you like dusk over the horizon. You are home now. You are safe now. Sleep well, dear one. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. The night air was soft like a sigh from the stars. A gentle hush had fallen over the land, the kind that only arrived when the moon was high and the world had exhaled. You are standing at the edge of a quiet meadow. The grass shimmers with silver dew, and a narrow trail winds its way into a grove of trees ahead. Fireflies drift lazily through the air, blinking like tiny lanterns guiding your way. Your steps are slow, easy. Each footfall lands gently on the soft earth beneath you. There's no rush here. No need to be anywhere but right where you are. You follow the trail toward the grove. The trees ahead are tall and slender, their leaves rustling in the faintest breeze. As you walk beneath their branches, the world becomes quieter still. Even the fireflies move more slowly here, hovering with reverence. A willow tree appears before you, nestled in the very heart of the grove. Its long branches fall like a curtain around its trunk, and the leaves whisper softly, brushing one another like fingertips across silk. You step inside the circle of its boughs. It's as if the air changes the moment you enter, becoming warmer, more welcoming. The scent of moss and distant rain lingers in the air, subtle and grounding. A low stone bench sits at the base of the tree, half covered in moss and bathed in moonlight. You ease yourself down onto it, your body relaxing into its smooth, cool surface. The willow sways above you, its movement gentle and lulling. Each branch seems to hum a soft lullaby, a language only trees remember. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. There it is. A rhythm, soft and slow. The pulse of the earth, the beat of the breeze, the lull of ancient roots stretching deep into the ground. You let it wash over you, soothing every part of you like a warm tide that pulls away every worry. In the distance, a night bird sings. Just once. Then silence again. Your breathing matches the sway of the willow. Inhale. The scent of night and dreams. Exhale. A letting go. Each breath deepens your calm. Each breath draws you further into the embrace of this moment. You feel the weight of your shoulders melt into the stone bench. The heaviness of the day slips quietly from your body, and the willow whispers on. You imagine what it has seen. The seasons changing around it. The golden leaves of autumn, the hush of snowfall, the awakening of spring, the bright chatter of summer. It remembers every breeze, every bird's song, every passing cloud. And now it remembers you. You become part of its memory. This night, this stillness, this sacred hush beneath its branches. You reach out and gently touch the bark. It's warm, pulsing faintly beneath your fingers like a steady heartbeat. The tree welcomes you, not with words, but with presence. A slow, deep comfort that wraps around you. You lean back and gaze up through the curtain of leaves. The stars twinkle above, peeking through the gaps like watchful guardians. A breeze stirs again and the willow sighs. The sound is like the turn of a page in a very old book. A story written in bark and branch and breeze. You find yourself drifting, mind quiet, thoughts loose and floating like dandelion seeds. Nothing clings. Everything just is. Your breath, your body, your heartbeat. They all move in unison with the tree, the wind, the night. You don't need to do anything. Not even think. A faint glow begins to rise at your feet. Not from the stars above, but from the earth itself. Tiny specks of light, like the breath of the forest, flicker in the moss and roots around you. They pulse slowly like fireflies dreaming. Their glow isn't bright. It's soft, soothing, like the memory of something kind. You feel their light enter your skin, warming your limbs. It travels gently up your legs, through your chest, into your arms. It moves with your breath. Your whole body hums with a quiet golden peace. The willow knows you now. It hums to you a cradle song older than time. It says you are safe. It says you are welcome. It says rest now. So you do. You surrender to the stillness. Your body sinks deeper into the comfort of the stone. Your limbs grow heavy, warm, loose. Even your fingertips rest without tension. Your thoughts soften, slow drift. The breeze sings its lullaby again. The willow rocks you in silence. The earth breathes beneath you. You feel as if you are lying not on a bench, but in the arms of the forest itself. The air is velvet. The stars blink slower. Time stretches, quiet and forgiving. You imagine roots wrapping gently around your ankles, not to bind, but to hold, to anchor you in safety, to cradle you while you sleep. The glow in the moss rises slightly brighter, then softens again. You are bathed in that hush, bathed in the song of stillness. You are far away now, floating just above dreams. The tree whispers again. You don't understand the words, but your heart does. It tells you that you are not alone, that you are loved, that your rest matters. And in this moment, you believe it. With your last waking breath, you smile. Softly, gently. And then the willow sings you into sleep, into stillness, into peace. And the night holds you, just as you are, exactly as you are. Deep in the grove, beneath the whispering willow, at home, at rest. I found the envelope nestled between a coupon booklet and the water bill, its cream paper soft at the edges like it had been handled too kindly, too long. No return address. Just my name, Theodore Marsh, penned in a looping script I hadn't seen in some time. Helen. I recognized her handwriting immediately. though it had been nearly 4 years since her name had last arrived in ink. I stood at the kitchen counter, the faucet dripping in a slow rhythm behind me, and turned the envelope over in my hands a few times before sliding a butter knife beneath the flap. Inside was a card, lavender-colored with the faint scent of rosewater clinging to its fibers. I could almost see Ruth holding it to her nose, smiling faintly and saying, "Helen always did love her perfumes." The message inside was short. "Dear Theodore, we've saved you a seat in the quilt circle. Thursday at 6 p.m. in the town hall. There's always tea and stories. Come stitch with us. Love, Helen." My thumb hovered over her signature. It was signed in the same ink as the rest, but I imagined the hesitation she must have felt when writing it. Helen had been Ruth's best friend since they were 12. The kind of friendship that weathered marriages, babies, disagreements over fabric colors, and late-night phone calls when the world felt too wide. She'd stood beside me at Ruth's funeral, holding my hand so tightly I didn't realize I was trembling until long after the ceremony ended. We hadn't spoken much since then, but I heard about her through neighbors, the church bulletin, and the occasional rumor passed across fences that she was still running the quilt circle like Ruth had done before her. I sat down with the invitation in my hand and stared at the old kitchen clock. 4:27, Thursday, 2 days from now. I don't know what finally made me go. Perhaps it was the silence in the house, the way it grew louder in the evenings when the sun dipped behind the trees and the walls seemed to sigh inward. Or maybe it was the smell of lavender that lingered on that card, unlocking a door I didn't know had stayed ajar. Whatever it was, I found myself that Thursday evening standing outside the town hall in my cleanest flannel shirt, fiddling with the buttons and trying not to look like a man who was half thinking of turning around and going home. The building hadn't changed much since the days Ruth and I came here for town meetings or bake sales. The white paint peeled around the windows. A pot of mums stood cheerfully beside the door, too bright for the gray of the sky. Through the window, I could see the familiar flicker of warm lights and hear the faint hum of voices, soft, layered with laughter, the kind of sound that once made Ruth's eyes crinkle at the corners. I adjusted the collar of my coat, inhaled deeply, and stepped inside. The room was warm in a way that didn't just come from the radiator humming near the corner. It was the kind of warmth that settled into the walls over time, stitched into the floorboards by footsteps and memories. There were maybe a dozen people, most of them women, gathered around 2 long tables pushed together. Mugs of tea steamed beside fabric bundles and pincushions. Patterns spilled across the surface like petals in bloom. Helen looked up first. "Theodore," she said, and her smile softened something inside me. "You came." I gave a small nod, suddenly unsure of my voice. I thought I'd stop by." She crossed the room quickly and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and fabric softener. It startled me how much I'd missed being held like that. Not romantically, not even affectionately. just held by someone who remembered who you used to be. "Come sit," she said, her hand gentle on my arm. "We've got a square waiting for you." I didn't know the others by name, though a few looked familiar from the grocery store or post office. There was Mara, the young baker whose cinnamon buns Ruth used to rave about, and Mr. Denham's widow, Estelle, with her smart gray bob and hands that never stopped moving. A couple younger women were threading needles, talking about their kids' school projects. A seat had indeed been saved, at the end of the table beside a small fabric square and a cup of tea already steeped. I sat. The tea was chamomile. My fingers curled around the warmth, grateful for something to do. Helen sat across from me, smoothing a square of fabric in her lap. "We're working on a new community quilt," she explained. "Everyone adds a square, something meaningful, a memory. Doesn't have to be fancy." I looked down at the blank fabric in front of me. "I'm not much of a sewer." Helen smiled gently. Ruth said the same thing, and yet, look. She reached into a box beside her and pulled out a faded patch, stitched with a little house, a tree, and 3 tiny figures. My breath caught. "That's ours," I said. "That's the house on Marigold Lane." "She made it our first year in this group," Helen said. Said it reminded her of summer mornings when you'd mow the lawn before the heat came in, and she'd make lemonade. I remembered that, and how she always wore that ridiculous straw hat with the pink ribbon while she weeded the garden. "She never told me she made this," I said, my voice hoarse. "She wanted it to be part of something larger." That was Ruth, always thinking of how things fit together. The room settled into a hum around me. Needles threading, scissors snipping, stories drifting across the table like lanterns. Mara shared about her square, one shaped like a chipped teacup. "It belonged to my gran," she said. She always said even broken things can hold warmth. Estelle's was a lighthouse, stitched in gold and blue. "For my husband," she said. "He always said I was his way home." I sipped my tea, listening. The fabric square before me remained untouched. My fingers itched, not with the urge to sew, but with the feeling of something stirring. Something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite belonging, but almost. I didn't finish my square that night. I didn't even start it. But I stayed until the lights dimmed and people began folding up their stories into bags and boxes. Helen walked me out. "It meant a lot," she said quietly, "you being here." I didn't expect to feel anything, I admitted. She smiled. "Grief softens us, Theo, eventually, like worn cotton. It frays the edges, but it lets more light in." I stood under the glow of the street lamp for a while after she left, the wind tugging at my coat. The sky was deepening into navy, the kind of dusk Ruth used to call candlelight blue. When I got home, I took down Ruth's old sewing basket from the closet. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were scraps of fabric, some floral, some gingham, some soft with age. I chose a piece with tiny blue forget-me-nots. I ran my thumb over it, and for a moment I swore I felt her beside me, just in the way the quiet filled the room. I wasn't sure what I would sew yet, but I would return. I'd take that blank square, and I'd find a way to stitch something into it. Something real, something honest, maybe even ordinary, because maybe that's what a quilt really is. A patchwork of ordinary lives made beautiful by the way they're held together. The town hall smelled of cinnamon and thread, an oddly comforting mix, like autumn's last warmth stitched into the walls. I stood just inside the doorway, clutching the blank fabric square Helen had pressed into my hands. It felt more like a question than a gift, this pale swatch of cotton. What could I possibly sew into it that wouldn't feel like a pale imitation of the past? Helen noticed my hesitation, her gaze soft behind her glasses. "Just sit, Theo," she said, using my late wife's old nickname for me. I hadn't heard it aloud in years. "You don't have to sew today. Just listen." So I did. The chairs were set in a loose circle, not quite a perfect shape, as if the group made room for life's uneven edges. There were baskets of fabric scraps at everyone's feet, colors and textures spilling over like little histories waiting to be told. Helen sat beside me, threading her needle with practiced ease, while Mara, the youngest among us, offered everyone lemon tea in chipped mugs. When Helen began speaking, her voice held the calm of someone who'd stitched through both grief and joy. "My square," she said, holding it up between fingers worn from decades of sewing, "is a picnic blanket under a tree." The design was simple but tender. Little cross-stitched plates, a checkered cloth, and two silhouettes resting under the shade of what I recognized as the big willow by Hollow Creek. That's where Harold proposed. It was a late summer afternoon and he forgot the sandwiches. We ate pears and laughed ourselves dizzy. There were soft chuckles around the circle. I could still remember Helen's wedding, the way she danced barefoot and her dress caught on the lawn. Elaine, my wife, was her maid of honor. That moment, Helen's square wasn't mine to claim, but it brushed against something in me. A warmth, a pang. Next came Rosa, whose embroidered square was a lavender bush, blooming wild in its little frame. "It's the scent I remember," she said. "My grandmother's garden. That's where I first felt safe." Then came Mara. She was only in her 20s, all curls and kindness. Her square showed a chipped teacup on a gingham napkin. "It's the cup my Nonna let me use when I was 7, she explained. "The day I baked my first lemon cake, she told me even chipped things can be beautiful." That stuck with me. Her eyes turned to me. "Start small, Mr. Theodore. A sound, a taste, even a smell. Just begin." I nodded, though something inside tightened. My memories weren't grand. I had no picturesque picnic or childhood garden. My marriage to Elaine was a good one. Quiet, steady, built on routines and grocery lists and shared glances across dinner tables. But where was the story in that? The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable hum. Needles dipped and rose. Stories unfolded like petals in bloom. Some folks embroidered hands holding hands. Others stitched lighthouses, cinnamon rolls, fishing lines, piano keys. No two were alike, and no one seemed in a hurry to finish. I took my blank square home. That night, the silence in the house was louder than usual. I made tea, sat in my armchair, and turned the fabric over in my hands. A sound, a taste, I muttered. Start small. I closed my eyes, and there it was. It came not as a grand vision, but as a flicker of sound, the clink of Elaine's spoon stirring her coffee. Always 3 stirs clockwise, no more, no less. I could picture her sitting at our old oak kitchen table, wearing her worn blue cardigan, reading the newspaper aloud in that half-distracted way she had. "I think we're getting rain tomorrow," she'd say. I never listened to the weather, but I always listened to her. And then, suddenly, vividly, I remembered something smaller still. The button box. It was a tin she kept in the hallway closet, decorated with faded violets. Every loose button from every coat, sweater, or dress over the years went into that box. When the power would go out during thunderstorms, we'd light a candle and sit on the living room rug, sorting buttons by color, or pretending we were jewel thieves cataloging our treasures. Elaine would hold up the most ridiculous ones, a gold button shaped like a lion's head, or a pink one from an old prom dress, and make up stories. "This one," she once said, holding a mother-of-pearl button to the light, belonged to a queen who escaped a tower disguised as a seamstress. We'd laugh. Then she'd press the button into my palm and say, "Your turn." It wasn't a vacation or a milestone, but it was ours. I went to the hallway, opened the closet. The tin was still there. The buttons shifted like small waves when I lifted the lid. I sorted through them slowly, remembering the stories, the stormy nights, the candlelit laughter. This, I realized, was my square. The following week at the quilt circle, I didn't say much, but I brought the tin. Mara's face lit up when she saw it. "What's this?" "Just a box of old buttons," I said. "My wife. She liked to keep them." Helen looked up from her stitching. "She loved stories, didn't she?" I nodded. "Especially the ones you made up." Carefully, I took out the mother-of-pearl button. "This one belonged to a queen," I said, mimicking Elaine's voice as best I could. "She escaped a tower by pretending to be a seamstress." The room smiled. "I want to sew this button onto my square," I added, "and maybe a candle, and rain outside a window. I don't know how to sew all that yet, but I want to try." Helen reached over and squeezed my arm. That's all it takes, the wanting. Over the next few weeks, I kept coming back. I was still slow with my stitching, my lines crooked, my tension uneven. But the others didn't seem to mind. They offered tips, stories, and second helpings of tea. It became a rhythm I hadn't realized I needed. Wednesday evenings at the town hall, the scent of lemon balm, the gentle clatter of scissors, laughter blooming in corners. I worked on my square a little each night. The window took the longest, a tiny embroidered pane with slanted rain and silver thread. I sewed the candle with gold floss and stitched a miniature version of Elaine's cardigan hanging on a chair. But it was the button I sewed last. The thread trembled in my fingers that evening. It wasn't grief anymore, not really. It was something quieter, a kind of gratitude maybe. I tied the knot beneath the square and sat back. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. When the circle next gathered, I handed my square to Helen. For a moment, I worried it wasn't enough, that it would pale beside the others, that its quietness made it forgettable. But when Helen looked at it, her eyes glistened. She'd have loved this, she said, especially the crooked candle. Mara leaned in, smiling. And the Queen's button. The group passed it around, each one pausing to look, to touch, to nod. No one tried to fix it. No one told me how I could have done it better. They simply received it, like a memory returning home. That night, we laid out the quilt on the long wooden table, squares placed side by side. It wasn't done yet, but even in its unfinished state, it pulsed with life, like a village mapped in thread. Laughter, loss, hopes, silly mistakes, all stitched in. Rosa's lavender bush now bordered Mara's teacup. Helen's picnic blanket touched a square filled with music notes. And there, near the center, sat my little storm-lit window and the button that once belonged to a queen. I stood there longer than I meant to, just looking. "You're part of it now," Helen said softly beside me. I nodded. "I think I'll keep coming," I told her. She smiled. "Good. We still have plenty of buttons to sort." When I got home that evening, I left the button tin out on the table. It wasn't storming, but I lit a candle anyway. And for the first time in years, the silence in the house didn't feel quite so heavy. It felt like space, like room for something new. The red thread trembled between my fingers. A thin sliver of memory wound tight with years and hesitations. I had threaded the needle 3 times already, each time backing out as if the thread might carry more than I was ready to hold. The sketch of the umbrella sat before me, simple lines on cream-colored cloth, like a ghost of a day long past. The moment lived sharp in my mind, her laughter echoing against the stone buildings, our feet splashing in puddles like children, the red umbrella spinning as we twirled beneath it. It was the first time I had seen her that carefree in months. Cancer had not yet tightened its grip. We were still pretending we had time. I touched the cloth gently. My fingers brushed the outline, and it was like pressing my palm to the surface of a pond, ripples of memory spreading outward. "Need any help?" came a voice beside me. I turned to find George easing into the chair beside mine, his back hunched with time, eyes bright with mischief. He nodded toward my square. "It's a beautiful start." "Is it?" I asked. "It feels like I'm taming ghosts." George chuckled softly. "That's what all good stitching is, really. Taming the things we're afraid might slip away." He reached into his tote bag and pulled out a folded piece of fabric. "Mind if I show you another?" I nodded, welcoming the pause. Unfolding his square, he revealed a simple musical note embroidered in navy blue, stitched beside the curved outline of a violin. "My wife used to play," he said, voice softer now. "Every morning, just as the sun cracked the window, I'd wake to her tuning the strings, and for a moment the world was golden." He looked at his hands, nodded and veined. "I can't hear her anymore, but when I stitched this, I swear it came back, just for a breath." There was a silence between us then, a comfortable one, the kind that doesn't beg to be filled. I looked down at my own blank square, the red thread in my hand, the lines waiting. "How did you start?" I asked. George smiled. "With trembling hands, just like you. I stabbed the fabric 3 times in the wrong place before I got it right." We both laughed, quietly, the kind of laugh that sits in the chest and doesn't need to echo. With a breath, I brought the needle to the fabric and pushed it through the first time. Just one stitch, just one. Just... The next hour disappeared. The world narrowed into the rise and fall of thread, the pull of memory through linen. Each stitch felt like an act of bravery, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. I didn't try to recreate the umbrella exactly. That was never the point. The red curved arc took shape slowly, clumsy in places, too tight in others. But it was ours, mine and hers. It carried the day we danced beneath the rain. The red thread became the canopy that held us together for a moment, even now, even here. Helen wandered past at one point, her hand brushing my shoulder. She didn't speak, just looked down and nodded, her eyes a little wet. She knew. When I finally leaned back, the square was unfinished but no longer blank. And I felt lighter, not unburdened, but less afraid of what the past still held. The circle had thinned out by then. Only a few of us remained, lost in our own quiet rhythms. Across from me, Mara sat humming to herself as she carefully stitched steam rising from a tiny teacup. George was scribbling something in a small notebook. I watched the way his brow furrowed, then smoothed like he was choosing memories with care. "What are you writing?" I asked. He smiled without looking up. "Names, places, things I never told anyone. I've started keeping a list." "A list of what?" "Of what matters," he said simply. It's funny. I always thought I'd be remembered for the big things. My job, the house, the retirement plans. Turns out it's the way she looked at me when I brought her a cup of tea in the morning that sticks the most. That struck something deep. I still boil 2 cups, I admitted quietly. Out of habit, one always goes cold. George nodded. That's love. It stays in the rituals. That night, I took the square home with me. The walk was slow, the early spring wind tugging at my coat, the stars peeking through the thin clouds. When I reached the house, I didn't go in immediately. I sat on the porch, square in my lap, and let the night settle around me. The porch light buzzed overhead, the same sound it had made every evening for the past 20 years. I imagined her stepping out the front door again, bare feet on wood, cup of tea in hand. She'd lean against the post and sigh, one of those deep, contented sighs that said nothing and everything at once. I stitched the umbrella, I whispered. Do you remember? There was no answer, of course, but something inside me stirred. The red thread shone faintly under the porch light, and I thought of the rain that day, the way it had pooled in the gutters and kissed her cheeks. We danced without music, without care, while the world softened around us. That was what I'd stitched. Not just an umbrella, but the feeling of being seen, even in the storm. The next quilt circle gathering came faster than I expected. I found myself arriving early. Helen was already there, arranging cups and plates, humming under her breath. She looked up and smiled. "You're here?" I nodded. "I thought I might help set up." Her eyes crinkled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Soon the others arrived, each with new squares, fresh stories stitched into the fabric of their lives. Evelyn brought a square with tiny embroidered birds, each one representing her grandchildren, she said, flying off to new corners of the world. Clara stitched her childhood bike, painted lavender with rusting handlebars, the first taste of freedom sewn into the spokes. We passed our squares around the circle, holding each one like a fragile truth. No one judged crooked stitches. No one questioned what made a memory worth keeping. When it was my turn, I offered mine slowly. There was a long silence after Helen passed it to George. Then Mara whispered, "It's beautiful, Theodore." And it was. Not perfect, but true. The umbrella curved like a cradle over empty space, and somehow that emptiness said everything. After the gathering, George handed me back my square and said, "Next time, maybe stitch the shoes." I blinked. "The shoes?" He grinned. "You told me once she wore those yellow rain boots on that day." I laughed, surprised at how easily it came. They squeaked when she walked. "There you go," he said. "That's the next thread." That night I started a new sketch. 2 small boots, slightly askew, one with a bent toe. I held the fabric to my chest for a long time before I made the first stitch. I was beginning to understand. This quilt wasn't about perfect memories. It was about remembering it all, about choosing, thread by thread, to carry love forward. not as weight, but as warmth. One stitch at a time, I was no longer alone in it. The quilt was changing. When I first laid eyes on it, it had seemed like a map of other people's lives, stitched memories too bright and rich to belong to someone like me. But now, weeks in, I found myself walking slower past the quilt before each gathering, letting my eyes linger longer on squares I'd come to know. I recognized the picnic tree in Helen's patch, saw the golden thread of Mara's chipped teacup catching the light just so. My own square, the red umbrella, felt more real each time I looked at it, like it was reminding me I'd lived that moment, not just dreamed it up. I hadn't expected to sew a second square. One had felt like enough. More than enough, really. But when George clapped a hand on my shoulder after the last meeting and said, "There's always another story, friend," I realized I'd been holding more than I thought. And that's when the yellow balloon surfaced. It wasn't a big story. Not like love or grief or a lifetime wrapped in fabric. It was just a market day years ago, and a little boy crying beside the peach stand with a balloon string clenched in his fist. He couldn't have been more than 4. His mother's voice had been cracking with panic a few stalls over. I remembered crouching down, asking his name, offering him a stick of cinnamon candy from my pocket. He took it, sniffling, and let me hold his hand until his mother came running, her face a canvas of fear and relief. The balloon had been bright yellow, sunlight cotton rubber. It bobbed over our heads like it had a story of its own. I stitched it slowly that week. Bright yellow thread, looped and knotted with care. A thin string trailing downward like the memory itself, small but grounding. Sewing had become, well, not easy but familiar. My fingers no longer fumbled quite so much with the needle. The rhythm of thread and breath had found its way into my evenings. I even started keeping a little tin box of scraps and threads near the window, beside the chair where I read. That's where I sat the evening Sophia joined. She was quiet when she arrived, a soft sort of quiet that seemed more about listening than retreating. Helen, ever the guide, introduced her gently. "Sophia just moved into the green cottage down by the bridge," she said, motioning toward the empty seat beside me. "She's new to the village, new to the quilt, too." Sophia nodded, offering a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan, twisting the wool like a nervous prayer. I recognized the look, uncertainty wrapped in hope. "First stitch is the hardest," I said after a moment. "Doesn't matter what story you pick, just has to be true." She glanced at me, startled by the words, then gave a small, grateful nod. "I'm not sure I have anything quilt-worthy." I nearly laughed, not at her, but with the familiarity of it. I'd said the same to Mara, hadn't I? And then there I was with a red umbrella and a yellow balloon stitched into cloth. "You'd be surprised what counts," I said. That night Sophia sat beside me, silent at first. Then slowly, as the others shared and stitched, she began to trace lines on her blank square with a pencil. a gentle curve, a looping thread, and then 2 tiny shoes. She stitched them in soft browns and creams, barely larger than her thumb. She worked with care, each movement a memory. They were his first, she said quietly to me, as if explaining. My son's. We were at the park and he let go of the bench and just walked, like he'd known how all along. I felt something loosen in my chest. There was something about the way she spoke, not just about her son, but about that moment, that made it more than just a memory. It was a beginning, hers, his, maybe even ours in this circle of stitches and stories. The next week, it rained. Not a polite drizzle, but a steady, soaking storm that turned the cobbled streets into rivulets. I showed up to the town hall a little damp and a little out of breath, and found Helen already inside. Her shawl hung near the heater, her knitting needles clicking softly. Sophia was there too, early. She looked up when I entered, her cheeks pink from the walk. I brought something, she said, fishing into her canvas bag. She pulled out a tin of pastries, round, sugared, and warm enough to scent the air with cinnamon and plum. They're my grandmother's recipe, she added, setting them at the center of the table. She used to make them for rainy days. I took one. It was soft, flaky, and full of something I couldn't quite name. Maybe memory, maybe comfort. You just made yourself very popular, George said, biting into one and humming his approval. Sophia blushed, but her smile held steadier this time. The room swelled with that rainy sort of warmth, the kind that settles into your bones and makes you forget the wetness outside. We sewed, told stories, and passed the tin around until only crumbs remained. Halfway through the evening, Mara arrived late, soaked through but grinning. She held up a dripping paper bag like a prize. Salvaged some fabric scraps from the thrift barn before the roof leaked, she announced. Everyone applauded like she'd brought treasure, and in a way she had. It became a tradition after that, trading little scraps. A corner of blue from George's music teacher days. A sliver of curtain Helen had saved from her first apartment. Even I contributed, cutting a strip from one of my old flannel shirts, the kind my wife used to wear when gardening. Sophia accepted them all like offerings, her patchwork slowly growing richer with shared thread. One evening, as I packed up to leave, she paused beside me. "Your squares," she said softly. "They feel kind, like they're made of noticing." It caught me off guard. "I just try to remember what mattered," I said, even if it was small. She nodded, then looked down at her hands. "I used to think memories had to be loud to count," she admitted. "Big events, milestones. But now I think maybe the quiet ones, they stay longer." We stood there for a moment, the town hall emptying around us, rain pattering soft against the windows. I thought of the red umbrella, the yellow balloon, the way my wife used to tuck her hair behind her ear when she laughed. "Yes," I said. "They do." Weeks passed. Threads accumulated. Sophia added more. A sun hat with a garden trowel, stitched for her mother who taught her to grow herbs. A music note for lullabies she sang at bedtime. A cluster of stars for the night she let herself cry after moving, alone in a new place, and realized it was okay not to be okay. I stitched too. A bench overlooking the lake, the silhouette of an old radio, a cup of tea with rising steam. The quilt began to look less like a collection and more like a conversation. One evening, Helen stood before us and unrolled a new length of fabric, the final row. "We're nearly there," she said. "Soon the quilt will be done." The room was quiet, not sad, just reverent. That night I didn't sew. I watched, I listened, and when the others had left, I lingered at the edge of the growing quilt, my fingertips brushing the edges of thread and time. Sophia came to stand beside me. "We've stitched a village," she whispered. I smiled. "Maybe the village stitched us." She laughed, light, honest. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just remembering anymore. I was still living, still gathering threads, and in the gentle hands beside me, the kindness in shared pastries, the shimmer of yellow and red on fabric, something like healing had begun to take root. I never imagined the rustle of fabric and the quiet hum of needles could feel like home. Harvest quilt day had arrived. I'd woken before the sun, nerves fluttering in my chest like a flock of birds caught in an open room. My hands were still and practiced, though, brushing crumbs from my best cardigan, gathering my squares in a linen bundle Helen had gifted me, tying it with a bit of leftover twine. I ran my thumb over the edge of the square I'd sewn just the day before, the yellow balloon bobbing upward beside the red umbrella. That square still carried a pulse of warmth, like a sunbeam I'd caught and kept. Outside, the village green was alive with color. Tables had been set up beneath bunting flags that swayed like lazy butterflies in the wind. The old oak stood tall at the edge of the gathering, and beneath it, quilts hung like tapestries, sun-washed, storied, and stitched by the hands of nearly everyone here. I watched as Mara and her brothers carried in a basket full of warm scones. George arrived with his accordion slung over his shoulder, nodding toward me with that same quiet respect he always gave. Helen waved me over. "There you are, Theodore," she said, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat. "You've got a place of honor." I blinked. "I do?" She pointed to a table near the center of the green, where each member's quilt square was displayed alongside their name. My 3 were laid neatly beside one another, edges pressed flat. The umbrella, the balloon, and most recently the pair of small shoes Sophia had inspired me to stitch, a symbol of new beginnings. People stopped to look. Not everyone commented aloud, but I noticed the pause in their eyes, the soft curve of smiles. One woman touched her chest as she looked at the umbrella, and I heard her murmur, "My husband used to carry one like that, too." Later, a teenager, Lena, I think, asked if the balloon meant I'd once been lost. I chuckled. Not exactly, I said, but I helped someone find their way. Maybe we both did, in a way. She nodded solemnly, then said she might sew a compass for her square. I wandered the grounds in a daze of gentle lightness, greeting people, accepting praise like unexpected gifts. Not extravagant, not loud, just kind, honest. My feet seemed to hover a little higher off the grass that day. That evening, as the sun folded itself beneath the hills and dusk crept in like a hush, we gathered again, this time beneath a lattice of lanterns strung between the trees. There was a fire pit flickering at the center and chairs arranged in a wide circle. Mara passed around mugs of spiced cider, and George played something soft and old on his accordion, the tune floating like memory. We brought our needles with us. The long, winding community quilt stretched across a series of tables nearby, and we were invited to stitch into it by starlight. Even if it's just one thread, Helen had said, let the night guide your hand. I took a seat between Sophia and Mr. Lyle, the beekeeper who always smelled faintly of honey and pine. My fingers found familiar rhythm, though my eyes kept drifting upward. The stars were particularly bright that night, as if someone had polished the sky just for us. Helen rose after a while, her square finished and glowing with silvery thread. Would anyone like to share? She asked. About what the quilt means now, after all these weeks? For a moment, silence. Then Mara raised her hand, always braver than most of us. I used to think quilts were just for warmth, she said, but this one feels like a heartbeat. Every square is someone's story, and together they remind me that even ordinary lives are full of extraordinary moments. George nodded next, saying the quilt reminded him of music, that every thread was a note and the pattern was a song that only became clear when you stepped back. Then Sophia, her voice soft but steady. I was so afraid to join. I thought I'd be too sad to sew. But the day I stitched the little shoes, something shifted, like the past stopped chasing me and started walking beside me instead. I felt her words echo deep in my chest, and then, as if guided by something gentle and unseen, all eyes turned to me. I cleared my throat, startled to find myself holding a scrap of navy fabric in my lap. I hadn't planned it, not really. But it had been tucked in my bag, along with a sliver of golden thread I'd found in my wife's sewing kit last winter. I'd kept it, though I didn't know why until now. I used to think I didn't have anything to add, I began, my voice low. I thought my memories were too quiet to matter, that my life, it had passed in a steady rhythm, without any real crescendo. But being here, sewing beside you all, I've come to see it differently. I held up the navy square, the gold star half-stitched at its center. This is for the night I danced with my wife in the rain, I said. For the child I helped find their parents, for the welcome you gave me, and the stories we've shared. Each moment, small on its own, but together. I looked toward the great community quilt. They shine. There was a silence then, not the kind that follows discomfort, but the kind that comes when something true has landed. George gave a single nod. Helen's eyes glistened. I threaded the last stitch into the little star, anchoring it into the corner of my memory square. It shimmered faintly beneath the lantern light, modest but steady. Not unlike myself, I thought. As the night wore on, the quilt grew longer, richer, its edges laced with laughter, with tears, with stories folded between seams. I watched as little Lena stitched her compass beside her mother's garden square. I saw Mr. Lyle add a honeycomb, and Mara, always inventive, stitched a little pocket into the edge, whispering, "For secret wishes." And beneath it all, the quiet hum of belonging. The stars blinked gently above us, and I imagined each one as a memory still waiting to be told. My old heart felt tender, but whole, like a page turned without fear. At the very end of the evening, Helen stood once more. "Before we go," she said, "I'd like us all to take a single thread from the quilt, a spare one. Wrap it around your finger, tuck it into your coat, keep it somewhere close. Let it remind you that you're part of something larger, not just the quilt, but the circle." So I did. I chose a red thread, like the umbrella, like the heart. I looped it gently and slid it into my shirt pocket. And as I walked home later, the sky still open above me, I passed the quiet bench by the bakery where I once sat, unsure and alone. It looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. I paused there, letting the moment settle like dew on my shoulders. I reached into my pocket, fingered the red thread, and smiled. The wind stirred the leaves along the path home. I followed them, step by step, carrying starlight and story in every stitch. The quilt lay stretched across the long tables in the town hall, dappled with light from the high-arched windows. Morning sun filtered through lace curtains, catching on threads of gold, cobalt blue, marigold, and mossy green. Dozens of squares, each with a life stitched into it. A dance, a goodbye, a teacup, a melody, a pair of baby shoes, and somewhere in the midst of them an umbrella, a balloon, my squares. I traced my calloused fingers over the seams, lingering at the little red balloon. The thread had faded ever so slightly since I first stitched it, but it still caught the light, still rose like it had somewhere to go. I smiled faintly. That memory of helping a lost boy in the market all those years ago felt less like a chapter in a closed book now, and more like one I'd underlined. Helen bustled past, her arms full of batting and border fabric. "Theo," she called without looking, "we'll start tying this afternoon. Bring your thimble." I raised my hand in acknowledgement, and she winked at me before disappearing behind a stack of folded muslin. Across the room, Sophia stood beside her own square. Her fingers hovered near the tiny embroidered shoes she had sewn weeks ago. She caught my eye and offered a quiet nod. It still astounds me how a thread can hold a whole story. Or maybe it doesn't hold it so much as release it, help you carry it out of your heart, where it's been tucked and heavy, and set it down where others might gently notice and nod. This was the last day. We'd gathered every Saturday for months, rain or shine, with biscuits or black coffee, stories or silence. And now the quilt was nearly finished. Only one square remained unsewn, mine. The others had left it blank on purpose. No one said it aloud, but we all knew. I had shared 3 memories, 3 fragments of who I was, and with each one I stitched. The village stitched me a little closer too. The square was a soft gray linen, framed on all sides by color and laughter, grief and resilience. I had been turning it over in my mind for weeks. What could be the final square? What did I still need to say? As I considered it, Sophia approached, carrying a needle and thread. "Helen asked me to help sew the border," she said, gesturing to the unfinished seam. I nodded. "I'd be glad to join you." We sat side by side. The quilt stretched between us, a silence forming that was not awkward or uncertain, but something better, something comfortable and wide, like dusk on a warm evening. Her fingers moved with steady grace, each stitch neat and deliberate. "You're good at this," I murmured. She glanced up and smiled. "I used to mend clothes in the evenings after my son went to sleep. It was calming." I nodded. "I find the same. There's something honest about thread. It either holds or it doesn't, but you know when it does." Sophia's eyes glinted. "Like people, maybe." I let out a low chuckle. "Yes, I suppose so." We sewed in unspoken rhythm. Every so often, Helen or Mara or George would pass behind us, their voices blending with the hum of the room. I could hear Mara laughing in the corner as she ironed the backing fabric. George was playing a soft tune on his harmonica near the window, the notes fluttering like sparrows. When the final seam was done, Sophia tied off the thread and laid her hand atop the quilt. "There," she said. "Now it waits for you." She looked at me gently, not expectantly, not with pressure, but with quiet faith. I stared at the empty square. My hands trembled slightly, as they had the day I first picked up the needle to stitch the umbrella. Back then, I wasn't sure I had anything left worth sharing. Now, I knew I did. That little house had lived in my mind for days now. A red-roofed cottage with white shutters, ivy crawling up one side, and a garden out front that bloomed wild and imperfect. It wasn't real, not exactly. It wasn't the home I'd shared with my wife, nor the place I'd grown up. But it felt true. It felt like a place where the version of me who had joined the quilt circle might live. A place of returning, of arrival. I opened the wooden supply box and found the threads I needed. Red for the roof, soft cream for the walls, mossy green for the garden, and a hint of blue for the sky. I threaded the needle slowly, carefully, then turned the square toward me and began. Each stitch was small but sure. With every pass of the needle, I breathed a little easier. The rhythm was its own kind of music. Up, down, pull tight. Again, up, down, pull tight. I thought of Helen's laughter that first day, warm and bright, of George's quiet tune and Mara's chipped teacup, of Sophia's gentle shoes and the way she'd looked at me today, with understanding, not pity. And I thought of my wife, how she would have loved this circle, how her hands would have added something elegant and wise. But most of all, how she would have nudged me to go that very first time. She always saw me more clearly than I saw myself. When the final stitch was tied, I held the square at arm's length. The little house looked back at me, solid, simple, welcoming. I had even stitched in a flicker of light in the front window, like someone was waiting inside. Home, I thought, not a place, a becoming. That evening the whole town gathered. The town hall had been strung with fairy lights, lanterns hanging from the rafters. Tables were set with lemon bars, gingerbread, and tea, and people filled the space with the kind of chatter that comes when something meaningful is about to happen. The quilt hung from the tall front wall, illuminated softly. It was breathtaking, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. You could walk along it and feel the shape of people's hearts, their joys and bruises, their beginnings and triumphs. Helen stood on a small platform and cleared her throat. "Friends," she said, smiling at each of us, "this quilt is more than fabric. It's more than stitches and squares. It is a map of our stories, and proof that we are always better together than alone." Applause filled the room. I saw George bow his head, emotional. Mara wiped a tear from her cheek, and then Helen gestured to me. One final thing. We would be remiss if we didn't thank someone who reminded us all that it's never too late to begin again. My chest tightened. I didn't like attention, but this moment, it wasn't spotlight. It was welcome. I walked slowly to the quilt. The hall quieted as I turned to face them. I cleared my throat. "I didn't think I belonged here," I said, voice steady despite the tremble I felt inside. Not because anyone made me feel that way, but because I thought maybe my story was already written. I was wrong. I gestured to the quilt. This helped me see that the ending of one chapter doesn't mean the end of the book. I still have things to sew, things to share. I pointed to my square. That's not a house I lived in, but it is a place I've arrived at. And I think in some way so have all of us. The applause that followed was gentle and full, not loud but whole. Afterward, people came up in small groups. They spoke softly, kindly. A man I barely knew clasped my shoulder and said, "That square looks a lot like my grandfather's old cottage. Made me remember." Mara handed me a tin of lemon shortbread with a wink. "To keep your hands busy between quilts," she said. And Sophia. She stood beside me without a word for a long while, just gazing up at the finished quilt. Then finally she murmured, "You stitched more than a square, Theo. You stitched yourself back in." That night I lingered after everyone had gone. The quilt stayed behind, hung like a banner of belonging. I stepped close and ran my fingers across the seams one last time. Each square was a voice, a reaching out, a coming home. I touched the red-roofed house, now nestled into the center bottom row, my square, but part of the whole. And for the first time in many, many years, I felt complete, not because life was tidy, but because I was no longer alone in it, because I had somehow become a thread in something larger, a story stitched not by one but by many, a story still unfolding, a quilt and a life still warm, still welcoming, still home. And that ends tonight's meditation. You're welcome to stay for a bit longer if you like. Have a beautiful night until next time.